Hi weaving friends, today we're going to be talking about metric raddles and I'm going to be showing you my personal method for how I use a metric raddle. So if you are the proud owner of a Louet loom, your raddle will be metric and it will be very likely included on the loom as part of the loom at the top of the castle. Other looms often come with an imperial raddle. Like this one, this is my Ashford Imperial raddle and this is the one that I use with my table loom. It is marked, the dents are marked in 1/2 inch increments and it's very simple to space out a warp in this because you figure out your ends per inch and then you just divide that in half to know where to place your little bouts of warp in there. Now, metric versus imperial is always interesting, especially for me because I grew up and in my schooling, I only did metric measurements. And it was only when I started sewing, my sewing teacher who got me started worked in imperial measurements. She was from Singapore and everything was done in inches. And so I learned to measure out all of my sewing measurements in inches. And I actually found it easier than the very small increments that metric gives you. So then when I came to weaving, after I'd been sewing for a long time already, it was very simple and natural for me to start thinking in imperial measurements in weaving as well. And you will very often find that most weaving measurements are done in inches. So when you end up with a loom that has a raddle that is entirely metric, it can throw you for a bit of a sixer, especially if you have grown up and been educated in a place where you've only used imperial measurements. But as with every weaving problem, there is a way around every single thing. And I'm going to show you today how I get around this problem with my metric raddle. Here is my Ashford Imperial raddle compared to my David Louet metric raddle right here. You can see that the spaces on the David Louet raddle are very much smaller than the roomy spaces of the Ashford. So I have two real life examples to show you on the raddle so that you can see exactly what I do. The first example is using an 8/2 cotton, so quite a thin yarn. And then the next example uses a fingering weight wool. So what I've done for both of these yarns, let's do the 8/2 cotton first, is I did a wrap test to determine the set, and I figured out the set as though I'm going to weave plain weave, not a twirl. If I'm going to use a twirl, then I need to be figuring out a different formula to get the ends per inch. But I figured it out for plain weave, and the figures were that this 8/2 cotton had 28 wraps per inch. Okay, so I divided that by 2 in order to get my plain weave. If you need to know more about how to determine the set or what the set actually is, I'm going to link a couple of videos down below. I already have videos explaining all of that and showing you how to do it. So that gave me the ends per inch of 14, okay? Friends, I just wanted to drop in here and just mention something. Even though I got 28 wraps per inch, giving me 14 ends per inch for plain weave, as a weaver, I generally would weave at a much higher set than that when I'm using 8/2 cotton. It is going to depend exactly on the yarn that you're using, but I personally prefer a closer set to what the 14 would be. And generally, I would be weaving upwards of 20 ends per inch with the 8/2 cotton for plain weave, and for twill, I would be weaving an even closer set than that. So I just wanted to drop in and let you know that. So that means that within an inch space, I want to have 14 of these threads. And I know that at plain weave, that's going to give me a correct balanced set. So now we come to the problem of the metric raddle. If I was using the imperial raddle, all I would have to do to get my 14 ends per inch to space them out is put 7 ends in every 1/2 inch dent, because then over an inch space, that would be 14 ends. But As you could see before, the metric raddle has much smaller spaces. So let's have a look. At the middle of the raddle, there is a mark, and that's useful because we're going to use that to measure out an inch. So I'm going to pop my little froggy tape measure right on that measurement there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark out an inch straight from that prominent part there to the next where I can get it as close to an inch as possible. Maybe if I do it on this side, it might help you to see. Okay, so 1 inch is from that spot is about there, and I'm going to mark the next dent beyond that inch just with some waste yarn. So I'm not going to be using that spot that I've marked with the waste yarn. That's the marker to say you stop at the dent before. So over that 1 inch, let's count how many spaces do we have to use. So this was where I started measuring right here, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces in which to space my warp out over an inch. So if I was using my metric raddle, I would have 2 spaces over that inch, but here I've got 5. Okay, so the way that I figured this out, and it's not going to be exact. It can't be exact because you can't convert imperial and metric in full round numbers. Okay, that's one of the issues, but that doesn't mean that we can't make it work. We can. Also, something that I realized some time ago is that the raddle, spacing the warp in the raddle, it does not have to be perfect. It can be a little bit sloppy, the numbers can be a little bit off. You want to get the approximate width so that your warp goes on smoothly, but it doesn't have to be a precision thing, so just bear that in mind. Okay, so back to my 8/2 cotton. I know that I want to have 14 ends per inch. So I want to get 14 of these threads into this space of 5 dents. So what I did is I divided 14 by 5 and I got the figure of 2.8. As I said, not going to be exact. I've got some little lengths here. I don't have an actual warp wound of this yarn, but I have 14 little lengths of yarn. So we're going to simulate a warp here. Just use your imagination. And basically I want to be able to fit these as evenly as I can into that 1 inch space. So what I'm going to do is, I know that I can get at least 2 in each space. So I'll start by doing that. And I'm cheating a little bit here because I already know what the outcome is because I've done this so many times. But this is a useful exercise for you just to see how you can work things out and make them fit. All right, so that's 2 in each space now. And obviously I've got some leftovers, so I'm going to try and make them fit. So how many leftovers have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4. If I had 5, I could put 1 in each dent, couldn't I? But I've only got 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 1 extra in each space until I run out. So what have I got now? I've got 3, 3, 3, 3, and 2. So the last space is going to have 2, and guess what? That is okay. It's fine. And so if we continued this pattern, I would then take off my waste yarn, get that out of my way, and then I would take my next lot of ends. Again, we have to use our imagination because I'm stealing from the other end here just to give you the example, and I'd be doing 3, 3, 3, 3, and then the 2 again. And that would give me my 14 ends within that 1 inch. Okay, that's the 8/2 cotton. Let's have a look at the fingering weight cotton now. And I have to put my waste yarn back in as my marker. I don't need to measure again because I know that there are 5 dents. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because we already measured that before. And then I'll pop my waste yarn into the 6th, just as a placeholder. So my fingering weight yarn, let's look at the figures for that. I got 18 wraps per inch, and then dividing that in half to get the set for plain weave, a balanced plain weave, that gives me 9. Now I divided 9 by the 5 spaces we have here, and that gave me a figure of 1.8. So again, we have that unbalanced figure, but we're going to make it work. So 1.8 is not quite 2, obviously. So I'm going to start by just putting one end in every dent across for the 5. Okay, and that means that I have 4 ends left. So it's going to be very similar to the last one that we did, the 8-2 cotton. I'm going to put an extra one in each space until I run out. That's the 4th, and then on the 5th we have 1 thread left on its own. We can take that out and no problems, we can just keep going. So now I've got my 9 ends within that 1 inch space. So that's going to be pretty well spaced once I finish my warp. And then of course I would just keep going in that fashion for as wide as my warp is. Sorry friends, it's me again. I must have been really tired when I filmed this video because I'm leaving a few important pieces of information out. Now that I'm editing the video, I can see these things that I have missed. I just wanted to mention that another option for this situation would be to just bump the set up a little bit and put in, instead of trying to juggle those 9 ends per inch, make it 10, then you've got an even number and you can just put 2 in per dent and that would work out to be 10. So what do you think, friends? Does that help to simplify the metric raddle for you? Or have you got a completely different approach for your metric raddle? I would be really interested to hear if you have a way that you think is even more simple. As I was just saying to my friend Kim this morning, we all learn in such different ways, but it's amazing that there are so many different ways to learn one thing that we can really all be accommodated for and come to an understanding of the things that we want to know. If you found this video interesting, this is the loom that I use for my introductory floor loom classes over at the online weaving school. And so if you're new to weaving and you have a Louet loom, those classes would be most helpful to you. In my table loom weaving course, if you're new to table loom weaving, and I use my Ashford table loom, then we use the metric raddle and I take you through the whole process of doing that. So if you're looking for a class, just have a think about the differences between those. And if you're still not sure which class would be more suitable for you, then you can always contact me by email. I'm very happy to help. Well, friends, thank you for joining me today. Check out my links down below. And until next time, happy weaving.